my people, how you doing? Hope you're having a fantastic damn day. Welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be breaking down Thomas Frank's 4-3-3 tactics in the game FC24. Of course, as always, if you do enjoy this video, please smash that like button. We are on the road to 3K subscribers, and it's my opinion that we will get there, hopefully by next week. I don't know, but I'd like to get there before 2024. So if you can and you're not subscribed, please hit that big red subscription button, and let's hop on straight into the video. So of course, we're playing a 4-3-3, which means I've gone with a 4-3-3 holding, which is more or less what they do tend to play with when they do play this formation. No real changes to it. There's no wing backs or anything like that. It's fullbacks. So it's one goalkeeper, two centre backs, two fullbacks, one DM, two central midfielders, one striker, and then of course, two wingers. Now, moving on to our tactics. Of course, gegenpressing, I think that best replicates and suits what Brentford try and do under the likes of Thomas Frank. They try and, be very aggressive, forcing the opposition into errors or potentially the ability for them to play out from the back and make mistakes, forcing the ball into the central areas of the field, and then inevitably turning it over with a very aggressive set of instructions that you will see fairly soon, where they'll look to try and turn the ball over and then transition into a very quick counter-attacking opportunity, either into the likes of Immerse or Ivan Toney or Wisa or whoever you have in your front line. They'll look to try and get them into the attacking phase of the game. As for the defense, and moving on to it, the defensive style is set to pressing off to possession loss. Now, this does work in tandem with gegenpressing, but I still think it's a very realistic approach that Brentford look to try and implement. And more so, they look to try and do it more centrally. So not overly pushing and pressing the opposition's goalkeeper or their backline at times. They look to do it very, very much so in those central areas of the field, forcing the opposition to try and either bypass the midfield or essentially try and play into the hands of what Brentford wants and inevitably turning it over and then allowing your boys to then transition into the attack. As for the team width, it is set to 45, which does prevent those crosses being whipped into from those wider areas into the attacking third for the opposition, but inevitably you will open up a few spaces here and there, but your midfield does tend to cover those spaces, so don't be too worried. As for the depth, however, they can go with a very high aggressive press at times, but I think mid-block best suits them. And of course, when they are under pressure and the opposition is trying to, score goals and pile on as much pressure as can be, I would advise you drop it down to around a 35. A bit of a mid-block / low-block approach, but nonetheless, very aggressive and physical players that you have in your central areas to try and defend against the opposition. Now, moving on to the offensive side of things, the fast-paced build-up. This often does allow the players like Ivan Toney, the likes of Imbuemo. Now, I know I'm speaking about Ivan Toney, he's not in the game just yet, but I think, come January, there will inevitably be an update and Ivan Toney will be in the game. So these are future thinking tactics. So we will also go over the Ivan Toney tactics as well. But nonetheless, you want your players in transition to try and run and be very aggressive with it, getting high and wide in the field and trying to exploit the opposition more times than not. Moving on though to the chance creation now, I think direct passing best suits what this team's trying to do. Like I said earlier, trying to get those players in behind, exploiting the opposition's backline more times than not. They do have very quick players, whether it's Ivan Toney down the middle, whether it's Imbuemo on the right flank cutting in, whether it's the likes of Wisa coming in from the left or even playing down the middle as a striker, or even Sharda. They have very quick, aggressive players up front that are willing to do whatever it takes to try and get a goal or an opportunity created for the team. For the width of the team, I've gone with it set to 60. Now, this does open up a bit of space in the central areas of the park for your players. It also opens up a bit more space down the wings for your opposition to try and, work into that space. But inevitably, it'll open up space for your striker. And that's more or less what you're trying to create, opportunities and space for your striker to try and run into or work with and try and get it to work against the opposition. As for players in the box, they don't look to try and overcommit to too many unless they are chasing a game. Then they'll obviously look to try and flood the box and work those big balls and try and hoof it into the central areas of the attacking third and then try and win those aerial duels and headers and so on. But nonetheless, if they're just set up with their normal game plan, I would more or less say a nice balanced approach, having around 3 players, 4 players sometimes in the box attacking those aerial balls or those cutback opportunities. I think that best suits it. And then as for corners and free kicks, as for always, set to 4. Now, we'll start off at the back with the goalkeeper Flecken. I would probably say, obviously it hasn't worked out for Raya at Arsenal just yet, but this has been a massive downgrade. I was so excited to see Flecken come into the Premier League. I knew about him at Freiburg and he was fantastic, but I've been fairly disappointed. His playing out from the back has not been good. His passing out from the back has not been very good. His ability to claim those aerial balls, not good whatsoever. So these instructions will best replicate and suit what he's trying to do, although poor execution. Anyway, so as for Flecken, I've gone with him on saving on crosses to be cautious, not always looking to claim that ball and alleviate the stress and the pressure on the back line. He's not the best at doing so, at least what I've seen yet. I think maybe one day he can be set to balance, but I don't think he'll ever be really good at claiming those balls. He looks to try and punch it more times than not, and not really look to grab it out of the air and then look to try and reset. So as for saving outside of the box, of course you aren't playing the highest of lines, you're playing a bit more of a mid block to sometimes even a low block at times. So saving outside of the box and him being that David Raya sweeper keeper approach, I don't think he is going to really replicate that role going forward. Moving on into our backline though, we've got the likes of Pinnock and Collins, and whoever else you put in here, you don't really need to change too much about them. They need to just remain structurally sound, and the base instructions tend to do that. Now moving on to our fullbacks, of course, differing roles. We've got Aya as the right back. Of course, it does change if you have the likes of Ruslev, and we will go over those rotations later. But as for Aya, he's set to having a balanced attack. So yes, he can progress forward, but other times he can also look to stay back and just hold down the right-hand side a bit. But when he does look to get forward, he will look to overlap and try and support the likes of Mbuemo. So those are the instructions I'd go for the right-hand side. But as for the left, Hickey or the likes of Rico Henry, they'll be set to the same set of instructions. For the left back, they are going to consistently look to try and bomb on, trying to create that extra space down that left flank, trying to link up more effectively with the winger, and also trying to whip in those crosses into the box for the attacking line. So join the attack as well as overlap, and then as for the defensive positioning, stick to position. Into our midfield now. Thomas Frank, he does like to go with a bit more of a man-to-man type of marking system, so not really zonal all the time. He likes to, be very aggressive with it, and like I said earlier, you trying to win the ball back aggressively in those central areas is more or less what Brentford are trying to do. So, starting off with the base of the midfield, Norgard, he's said to have a tight marking defensive behavior, so not looking to be zonal and cut out and intercept passing lanes, nope. Man-to-man marking, very aggressive style of football, looking to try, show the opposition that you may have to just bypass us and go long, and that in turn plays into the hands of Brentford because they have very willing centre-backs, very aerially dominant centre-backs that can win that ball back. As for the attacking support for your DM, not looking to always progress too far forward, but he can do so, but more times than not, he will stay back while attacking. And for the interceptions, your number 8s do a lot of the running around, so you want your number 6 really to more or less stay put and not be too wayward and aggressive with his approach, and more or less sit in front of the backline and protect them. So for the interceptions, it's set to normal, and then as for the positioning freedom, set to stick to position and then cover the defensive areas. Sit in front of that backline at times and look to try and shield them as best as possible. Now, onto the number 8s. Now, we've got the likes of Vitali Janelt, of course, on the thumbnail. I do love this player. He is such a good player to sign for any of your career modes or a road to glory eventually. Got a real face, of course, and I love those players. But nonetheless, he will be a bit more of the box-to-box player, both him and Jensen. But the main difference between the two is he will look to break into the box a lot more, trying to overlap the striker in certain moments, link up a bit more with him as well. Almost playing as a number 10, or even an advanced number 8 at times. But nonetheless, doing a very good job with it. For the interceptions, set to aggressive, as well as cover the center for the defensive positioning. So, when the ball does enter those, or when you do turn the ball over, your two number 8s, they won't look to drift wide, they'll look to stay very central, making very hard for the opposition to try and bypass them in those central areas, looking for them to try and work the ball out wide, where they'll play into the hands of your tracking back wingers in certain moments, as well as your aggressive fullbacks. And then finally, for the positioning freedom, it is set to stick to position, a very structured, rigid offensive system. Onto the other number 8 now, of course, Jensen. A very similar role, you can say. The only difference is he has the option to stay on the edge of the area and look to try and create and rotate the ball when required, and sometimes having the ability to break into the box as well, but again, not always doing so, whereas the likes of Janelt will consistently look to break into the attacking area. Now, moving on into our forward line, we'll start off on the left-hand side with Lewis Potter. Of course, him and Visa will have the same roles. So if the likes of Ivan Toney does come back, which he will, you just shift Visa into this left-hand channel, or even the likes of Sharda, and they'll all three of them essentially have the same roles going forward. So as for the defensive positioning, it is set to come back on defense, often looking to try and help out the likes of either Rico Henry or Hickey, because they do look to try and progress the ball forward. So you need a bit more coverage in that left back area at times. Staying wide is essential, creating a lot of space down this left hand channel with the linker play of your left back in certain moments. Getting him behind, using his pace is essential, as well as aggressive interceptions, looking to consistently try and push those wide areas more centrally, playing into the hands of what the central area wants, and then inevitably trying to find more space. So you're looking to try and hurry the opposition more times than not, as well as the ability for your wingers to try and crash into the box in certain moments, getting in there, whipping those crosses in either for their teammates or potentially landing on the other end of those crosses for themselves. Onto the right hand side now for Bryan Mbeumo. For the defensive support, I've gone with a basic approach because he does tend to not always come back, but he can do so. He can look to try and help out the right back in certain moments. But for this system, I think it's best to try and leave him slightly high up the field, with having the ability and the option for him to sometimes drop a bit deeper. The chance creation is set to cut inside. He does look to try and operate as almost a secondary striker in certain moments, but getting him behind and using his pace and his physicality to try and beat the opposition defense is what you're looking to try and do on a game-to-game basis, a moment-to-moment basis. You're going to consistently look to try and get the best out of Mbeumo in this right flank position. As for the interceptions, it's still set to aggressive, as well as the support on crosses is set to get into the box. And then finally, we've got the likes of Visa. He is set to having a balanced width, so he can look to sometimes alternate positions with Mbeumo, vacating the striker role, playing a bit more on the right-hand side, or potentially staying a bit more central and landing on those crosses himself. He is going to use his pace to get him behind and beat the opposition's backline. He does tend to play on the shoulder of the opposition backline at times. Aggressive interceptions also still set to be on, looking to try and press and hurry the opposition with their goalkeeper restarts, or making sure that they're just not comfortable with the ball in their backline. And then as for the defensive support, just like with Mbeumo, having the option to drop a bit deeper or potentially hanging up the field waiting for the counter-attack. So guys, if you do make rotations to the side in the likes of Rusev, a more traditional right back that does bomb on forward, as well as the likes of Ivan Toney do come into the team, these are the instructions I would suggest you go with. Now, of course, I don't have Ivan Toney in the game, as he hasn't been put back in the game, but I've gone with Neil Maupay in that position, so just use your imagination a bit. We'll get there. Anyway, starting off with the right back. Now, Rusev, like I said, more of a traditional right back, does look to bomb on forward, sometimes even being seen as a right wing back. So, for the attacking runs, he's set to join the attack as well as overlap, consistently adding a lot of space and pace down that right flank. And then as for the defensive positioning, I've gone with him to set to stick to position. Now, moving on to the likes of Ivan Toney / Maupay. Naturally, more physical, an out-and-out number 9 can back into the opposition, and more or less that's what you're trying to replicate and recreate. So the support runs are set to stay central, and you'll see when Mbeumo does cut inside, there's a nice dual striker tandem that does come into play, and it's very, very effective, overloading in certain areas, opening up space in other areas, and it just gets the team ticking on. As for the Ivan Toney approach, you want him to be able to use his physicality, his pace, his power, and more or less target man does get the best out of him. His link-up ability with Mbeumo, as well as Visa in certain moments, is very, very good. The flick-on headers, the little round-the-corner passes, very, very good. And target man does get the best out of him. As for the interceptions, I've gone with aggressive, just like with your previous striker, but a major change is he won't look to drop deep. He'll look to consistently be the out there ball into feet, back into the striker, or potentially take on the opposition's backline. I meant to say defender, not striker. But he'll look to try and, take on the opposition's backline more times than not as that out-and-out number 9 superstar striker. So yes, guys, that is my version of what Ivan Toney can do in this team. Of course, when the game does update in 2024, inevitably putting him back in it, I would still say go with this set of instructions. And there you have it, people. That is my version of Thomas Frank's 4-3-3 Brentford formation, his set of tactics. I can set them out to try and play a very realistic brand of Brentford football. So, this is your moment. Please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, share the video if you would like. But most importantly, I hope you guys have a damn great day. I'm out!